Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today with me is Mark Ralls, who is the CEO of ActivTrak. Mark, why don't you tell us what ActivTrak does?
Yeah, thank you for having me on, by the way, Gleb. I really appreciate it. I've been a listener to the podcast. And ActivTrak is a workforce analytics software company. So what we do is we provide a platform, a SaaS platform that allows companies to measure and more deeply understand how work gets done within their workforce. And we do this in a number of ways by pulling together analytics that allows companies to understand, who's working, how many hours, who might be at risk of burnout, where might you have less engaged employees that you need to work to re-engage, what technologies are your employees using to go about their jobs. We provide a wide variety of data to give you a really full view of how work gets done within your company.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Now, I know you some of cognitive biases and hybrid work and remote work is one of the topics you think about, and how that might impact data, how it might impact thinking about hybrid work and remote work. So tell me about your perspective on this question.
Yeah, so I think the question of hybrid work and remote work and how you continue to operate your business and gain visibility into how work gets done in that scenario is a fascinating one. And it's one that, as leaders have been grappling with, especially since the advent of COVID, where it forced, most companies into remote work. And then now what we're seeing is just continued hybrid work. And really seeing that just across the board, across industries, across geographies, and so on. Our perspective is that, work can take place in a variety of locations. There are pros and cons to hybrid work that vary less so by the company and very more so by the role and the specific individual. And so what our perspective is and our approach is, we capture quite a bit of data about how work gets done and how your employees go about, doing their job each day. And that allows you to develop data-informed policies and decisions to then ensure that you're able to get to the business objectives you need to, while doing so in a way that best supports your employees. And so that can take the form of, certain functions or certain employees, working hybrid more often or working remote more often, or also, the other, on the other end of the spectrum, you could have certain functions or certain specific individuals, say, new hires or, less tenured employees that you want to have in the office, more frequently. You might say, hey, they should be in the office 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, possibly full time, in order to create the proper learning and development environment for those employees. Whereas you may have other more tenured employees or employees in different functions that, it can be full-time remote, and that's actually not a disadvantage at all. And so, by having the data on who thrives, who delivers peak productivity in scenario, that allows businesses to make more informed decisions.
Okay, but I want to circle back to the question of bias. So bias, of course, implies that people are making the wrong decisions. So what have you seen about people making the wrong decisions, and how has the role of cognitive bias played into that? And what can companies do to avoid making the wrong decisions? Even though they might have all the information they need, they still run into the mental blind spots that cause them to make the wrong decisions.
That's right. That's right. And I think that hybrid work and remote work increase, risk of bias in a few key ways. So one of those is that I think, what we've seen in talking to our customers is there can be a bit of a propensity to equate in office, willingness to come in office and to work in the office, to equate that with someone who's more committed to the company or more committed to getting work done. There's things we've termed proximity bias, right? The person that I can see in front of me, I'm more likely to believe that they're working or to trust their perspective or opinion. There's recency bias, which occurs across a wide swath of interactions and in different scenarios. But again, the person that I've most recently spoken to, most recently sat across the table from, most recently worked with, I may be overly biased by their input or their perspective on an issue. And what we find is that when you take a more data-driven approach, again, to understanding how your employees are working and who's working, what you find is that many of those biases are unfounded. So the person that does come into the office may not be more committed. you can have quiet quitters sitting in a cubicle just as much as you can have a quiet quitter sitting at home. And just the opposite, you can have someone who's overworking and burning themselves out remotely. You can have that with someone who's coming into the office each day. And so you really have to be data driven to understand, how productive are employees, how much time do they spend collaborating with their peers, how much time do they spend in a focused, productive state. That can vary quite a bit, in person, it can vary quite a bit remote. And that, again, if you come in with certain biases, like my person who's willing to come in each day must be more committed to the company, again, that can actually mask, their true underlying performance, true underlying feelings. Whereas, the data that we collect is remarkably objective, right? And allows you to get an objective point of view that cuts through much of that bias.
Well, that's really helpful. So I've helped 23 companies by now figure out their hybrid work, remote work arrangements. And we definitely had situations where companies are asking employees to come to the office, and then the productivity of those employees drops compared to when they work remotely. And that's pretty clearly because they resent coming into the office and doing the same thing in the office that they would be doing at home, like having a video conference meeting, which they can do just as well from home without distracting all of their colleagues around them, or doing emails or writing reports or programming or something like that. What have you seen about the changes in productivity of employees when they're asked to come to the office when they don't actually want to come to the office?
So we see results, I think, that are generally in line with what you've seen. One thing that I would add is that what data has shown, and our data supports this idea, but what I've seen from third-party studies is that employees tend to work about half of their commute time if they're allowed to work remotely. So if you just think, if you have an employee who's commuting 30, 45 an hour each way, you're getting substantial additional kind of work and productive time out of that employee when they work remotely, because again, they do tend to give about half that time towards the company, as opposed to spending that in their car, sitting in traffic and doing whatever they're doing. So that's one thing that we've certainly seen. We definitely, it is often eye-opening to our customers to understand the behavior of in-office employees versus remote employees, and because it does not often correlate to what their preconceived notions are. For, I think, one of the causes being exactly what you named, which is the employee that doesn't need to be there, can be resentful, can potentially be less productive, can be disengaged. And just because they're in the office doesn't mean you're protected from that level of disengagement.
And it's kind of the opposite. The office causes that disengagement where they would not be necessarily disengaged working from home.
That's right. That's right. Because, and especially if it's by their own choice, right? If they're given that flexibility to choose, employees that have, this is basic self-determination theory, right? If you have control over how you go about executing on your work, you're much more likely to feel fulfilled in doing that work, all else equal. And so companies that force employees either way against their will, are less likely to see fully engaged, fully productive employees.
Now let's segue to the question of monitoring, the ethics of monitoring. We did see some research which shows that when employees feel that they're being monitored, that causes them to be less engaged, have more burnout, have less retention, have lower productivity. And that, of course, is a concern from the perspective of monitoring software. So what have you seen around this question? What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd like to do is just differentiate a bit, and because I think the word employee monitoring itself gets a bit of a bad rap, just by association with, I think, what is more rightfully called employee surveillance. If you think about in a pre-COVID era, if you were to walk the floor and check on your team and see who's at their desk and who's really deeply engaged in work and who isn't, I would argue that's employee monitoring. But we don't attach the stigma to that practice, that we do, more of intrusive surveillance tactics, which are things that don't contribute to productivity, just to be abundantly clear. So things like capturing webcam images or instituting policies that someone can't be idle for more than a certain number of minutes. Those are things that are really, they allow a manager to play gotcha with an employee, which really, infantilizes the employee. It robs them again of the control of how they get their work done. which is demotivating. And so it's no surprise that studies show that that leads to a reduction in performance. Whereas our approach to workforce analytics is a much more collaborative approach between the employer and the employee to provide data on how do you go about getting your work done, what tools are you leveraging, what processes are you following, what drives distractions into your workday that we can potentially eliminate, what tools perhaps fight you in getting work out the door as opposed to helping you get work out the door, and then how do employees and managers work together in order to identify those issues, create solutions to address them, and then ultimately drive up productivity while also driving up employee engagement and employee satisfaction. And again, so when done right, workforce analytics, which again, I think sometimes get painted with this broad brush of employee monitoring with the connotations of that, is a really different beast. It's a really different animal, than these surveillance tactics, again, which don't improve productivity. They reduce productivity. They're not productive. They're not, they're not contributing towards the solution. We did a study and were written up, I believe, in Bloomberg about the World Cup. And when the US played in the World Cup, you did not see a drop in productivity. What you saw was that employees shifted the hours in which they worked in order to get their work done and also enjoy the World Cup, right? And so that's what you get when you have proper workforce analytics. A surveillance tool that just says, "Hey, you're idle and it's a World Cup game, and I'm gonna get upset with you on that." That doesn't actually increase productivity. It doesn't actually help employee morale or employee engagement. It's not the point. The point is to increase productivity, and the best way to do that is working in tandem with employees.
I think that's a good message. Now, as we're wrapping up, what do you think is going to be the future of hybrid work and remote work as employees and employers have access to more technology, whether it's workforce analytics, whether it's the growth of AI, which certainly is going to make both analytics and communication easier, whether it's artificial reality and virtual reality? You're in the tech space, you're supporting hybrid work and remote work. What is your vision for the future?
Yeah, my vision, I think that we are not, I don't think we're at the point yet that leaders and companies are making decisions in a really fundamental kind of long-term, fundamental business model defining way. I think so far what we're still seeing is we're still evolving, and we're still kind of coming to terms with the fact that what we're in is the new normal, and that hybrid work to one extent or another is here to stay for the long term. It's not, that genie will not be put back in the bottle. And so I think what we will start to see is real innovation in, for example, the approach to real estate. So if companies are going to settle on, I was talking to the CEO of a company the other day, and he said, "Look, we are driving our employees to come in the office one day a week, and only one. And the reason for that is that if we get 30% of our employees on Tuesday and 30% on Wednesday and 30% on Thursday, then everyone's still on Zoom calls all the time. They just happen to be doing Zoom calls from the office," right? To your point. If we drive everyone to come in on Tuesdays, then we can get close to 100% employees in the office on Tuesdays, and then we can have a lot of in-person meetings and a lot of collaboration time, brainstorming, creative thinking, and then we can go about our work remotely the rest of the week. And so what does that mean for your office environment and the decision around your lease? What does it mean for sharing workspace across companies, where you might have companies that are going to each come in one day a week? You don't hear a lot of news just yet about really concrete strategies there. And I think that when you start to hear that about innovative office environments and innovative approaches, I think that's when you'll know we're really settling into hybrid work as a go-forward strategy. And then I think I think we'll continue to see virtual collaboration apps develop. I don't know whether those will be virtual reality, they'll be augmented reality, something else. I really don't think that the ability to pull 4 people into a room and go to a whiteboard and jointly brainstorm, we really haven't recreated that perfectly yet.
Sure.
In a virtual sense. And so I think there'll still be innovation there. And then, like you mentioned, with generative AI, I think that's going to be fascinating because it will impact the work that gets done, the specific tasks that are completed across so many functions. I don't think generative AI is going to replace jobs. I think it will replace tasks in jobs. And that then unlocks much more potential for smart, intelligent humans to focus their energies in more creative and more productive ways, which I think is frankly just super exciting. And so I think we're going to see a lot of innovation and a lot of experimentation of new business models, and I'm just really excited about it.
That's an exciting vision. Thank you very much, Mark. That was very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoyed it.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show, and make sure to leave a review. It really helps others discover the show, and it helps us improve the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.